Hi lovely people, it's Nicola back in the Stitches and Slowvember sewing room again. I have some finished objects to show you. I don't think you're going to be seeing me actually making anything in this video. I'm just going to show you a few things that I finished over the last few days. So I'm hoping it's not going to be a super long vlog because I know there's been a lot this last couple of weeks and they've been a bit long. So try and keep it shorter today. I have finished the vested interest knitted vest. Let's just bring in my dress form here. It is finished. Ta-da! I'm really, really, really happy with it. Now, I did tell you before, I think, that when I was binding off, I got a little bit of white on here, but I wasn't going to change it because I didn't want a knot right on the edge. But at least with the sleeves, or rather the armhole openings, that's what I meant to say, I managed to get it all light blue without any other blips of colour. There's one itty bitty mistake in this, which I will tell you about, and then we'll get on to the positive stuff. So on this back part here, when I was working my way up and just doing this last little bit here, I didn't realize at first, but I think it's on this side, I must have decreased right here instead of doing it on this side. And I wondered, when I was picking up stitches around the neck, I was wondering why it seemed like I couldn't pick up as many stitches on this side. And it wasn't till I was picking up stitches for this that I realized I put a decrease in the wrong place. Let me just lift her up so you can see the bottom part. So I ended up making the XL. This is a drops design pattern, vested interest, and I made the XL. My gauge was tighter than the pattern, so it came out smaller than an XL. And in the end, it was an inch of negative ease, which actually fits me perfectly because there's a little bit of stretch for it to fit around my body, and I think that's much better for a vest. I didn't want it to be baggy. When it came to picking up stitches for the neckline and the armholes, I didn't worry about matching what they said to pick up. They said about X number of stitches. And I thought, well, my gauge was off. My stitch and row gauge was tighter. And I thought I probably had to make more rows to knit to measurements. What's good about this pattern, as long as you get your stitch gauge right, then you are knitting to measurement on the ribbing and on the body and on this part here. So there's no shortage there if your gauge is tight, which is awesome. I suppose if your stitches and rows were really, really loose, you might hit a snag when it came to the neck shaping and then maybe not having enough room to do any more rows. I don't know. But yeah, what I ended up doing, after I had knitted in the round on the stockinette, I had to knit flat, and my gauge knitting flat is usually different because my pearls are looser knitting continental than my knits. So I ended up knitting continental one way and purling English throwing back because that tightened up my pearls a bit, and so my gauge looks a lot more even that way. So absolutely delighted with that. And what I did was also I went back to the swatch cap that I had made and I added an applique gingerbread person. The funny thing was, well, it wasn't very funny at the time, but I tried duplicate stitching a gingerbread person on there and it looked terrible. And so I picked out the stitches, and in the process of picking out the stitches, I cut some stitches behind here. And then I had the bright idea of doing an applique. So I darned / duplicate stitch over the damaged area so that it wasn't going to fall apart, and then I appliqued over the top so you can't see it. So it's all done, and that was just a little bit of that gingerbread coloured yarn that was kind of left over from making the vest. So I weighed this thing, and my other little balls of yarn, I did wind off a little bit. What is that? That is not felt. That doesn't belong in there, does it? I did wind off a little bit of yarn to get to the right place in the colour striping. I think when it came to the front, I wasn't so worried about the back. But yeah, I had to make sure I was hitting the right colour striping. So all this weighs about 540 grams. So I got the vest and the hat out of less than half a ball of the Caron Anniversary Cakes. Peppermint Plaid colourway. Very, very happy that's done. I ended up completing it in 13 days. And Christmas is still a couple of weeks away, so I'm going to be getting lots of wear out of that, I think, this month. So we're going to go over to my sewing table now, because there are 3 things I want to show you over there. I've given you a really wide-angled look so that you can see what a disaster my table is. This wreath is the one that was in my kitchen for almost a year. I had tied lots of pale pastel fabrics to it and hung a heart in the middle of it and put it on the wall in my kitchen, I think around Valentine's Day, or maybe a bit before that. And so I painstakingly took all the fabric off it today, and I have put fresh ivy on it from my garden, put some of my dried fruit on there, wrapped a teeny bit of ribbon around, and a little bundle of cinnamon sticks. So I'm going to hang that on the front door, and I think that'll look really lovely. The other thing I finished today, you might have seen me attempting to get this paint to work on this mason jar lid. Well, in the end, I did, I think, 4 coats of red, and I did my white dots, and then I did a coat of Mod Podge gloss. And I had no idea what I was going to do with it, or how I was going to make it into a toadstool. And then I was sewing again today and going through tons of spools of thread, because I was using up the ones that were low on thread. And I tossed a handful into my drawer, and I thought, wait a second, what if I use a thread spool as the bottom or the stem of my toadstool? Ta-da! So what I did was used a Gutermann thread spool for the bottom of the toadstool and wrapped it with yarn. I just had to put a little bit of hot glue at the bottom part and the top part, which you can see because it's that nasty silver one. It's not a clear one. I really need to get more glue sticks that are clear. So that's finished. So that's going to have to go upstairs on one of my windowsills with my pine garlands that I made not long ago. All right, we're going to clear the decks a bit, and then I'll show you what I've been sewing. So you may remember back in November when I was doing my Slowvember series that I made a couple of crumb blocks, and I didn't really have any particular plan for them. I just made them out of scraps, random scraps, not with no concern for like color matching or anything. And by the time I'd mulled on it a little bit, I thought it would be a rather cool idea to make a cushion cover, a zippered cushion cover, and then stuff it with the scraps, and it could store my scraps while I wasn't using them. My scrap bag is a stonking great crocheted bag. It is absolutely huge. I absolutely love it. And it's stuffed full with an insane amount of scraps. So you can see how full it is, right? Can you see how full it is? It's like full to the top. It's hard to tell this close up, but anyway, it is full almost to the top. So I have made these 21 blocks now, and the scrap bag doesn't look any emptier at all. And I also have these 2 little pieces in progress, which I'm going to end up making another scrap block with. The thing with these crumb blocks is you start just sewing random pieces together, and gradually you build up this fabric and you trim it to the size you want, which in my case ended up to being 7 by 6 for no real reason at all. So every time you make one of these blocks, you have sometimes a decent amount of trimming, which you can then use in another block, and also other pieces that didn't make it into the block. And so once you've made the first couple, you're on a roll. It's like potato chips. You just can't stop at one. There is all sorts of weird and wacky fabric in here. There's like Christmas teddy bears, there's butterflies, there's bell peppers, seahorses, Halloween fabric, which may or may not glow in the dark, peace symbols, cats, mice. Yeah. So last night and this morning, I spent probably how many hours in total? At least 4 hours in total last night and this morning building these blocks. And I thought that maybe 9 of them would make one side of a cushion cover. So I thought, okay, I'll make 18. Well, I couldn't stop, could I? So instead of making 18, I kept on going, and I've currently got 21 of them. And I want to just make more and more. But after a while, all of the sewing and the cutting and the rotary cutting and the ironing, it gets to you after a while. And my right wrist was glad of the break. I found one with donuts. I have no idea where the donut fabric came from. I think that might be my friend Annette again. She gave me quite a lot of the scraps in here. So many scraps. So what I might try is sewing 9 of them, like 3 across, 3 down, into one piece. See if that seems like a good size for a cushion cover. And then make another one the same size for the back. I haven't decided whether to use batting in it, whether to use lining in it. I think probably it would be a good idea if I'm going to make any sort of zippered thing for holding my scraps. It would probably be nice if it was lined. But I don't really want to use swathes of my good stuff and use up a lovely big piece of quilt cotton just to line something that's just going to hold scraps. So I may not. It's amazing how many of these bobbins and how many thread spools I have emptied in the last 2 sessions of sewing. I've been going through the ones that had the least amount of thread on, and it just feels like spring cleaning. It's wonderful. So I'm just going to grab 2 of them and sew them together. I'm going to join 3 by 3 and see how it looks. The one downside to this method is all this sewing and trimming you do. Sometimes you end up with some very, very tiny pieces, and sometimes those pieces are right on the edge. So you're sometimes fighting with a lot of bulk. I do suggest a good strong needle when you're doing this, because at times you're going through quite a few layers. I think I have a Microtex 80 in there, so it's sharp, but it's not the thinnest size, which is probably just as well. Actually, when I was out walking, honestly, my husband must roll his eyes at me all the time, because we're out walking and I'm saying, oh, this the blah blah blah, this is the thing I'm making, this is the thing I'm working on, the scraps and all that, and while we're out walking, and I really need to be more in the moment while we're out and about, I'm just thinking about, oh, maybe what I could do with those scrappy pieces is I could make a more of a bolster type cushion. Maybe it could have some sort of drawstring at each end, so that I could stuff it with scraps at one end, like quilt cotton scraps, and batting scraps at the other end. This is where my head goes when I am not keeping it in check. But I think I'm just going to go with a rectangular cushion idea for now. I think. Just imagine if you made a bed-sized quilt out of crumbs. Scrappy crumbs. How insane would that be? So much sewing. Now it's time for the long seams. And I've still got all of these left over. 1, 2, 3. I say all. I've got 3 left over. Well, I'm really glad I thought of that, because that neatened off my edges quite well. Now I just need to put the zipper on this end. All right, now I just have to sew around the outside. It's a pretty amateurish finish, but as I said, this is just a scrappy bag made for scraps. I think I should measure it and see how big it turned out. Very approximately. About 19 inches long by about 15 wide. Well, that was a nutty amount of sewing in the last 2 days, but I finished my scrappy bag for scraps. How nutty is that? There's all sorts of threads falling off it right now. I am so covered in threads right now, you would not believe. I said to Mrs. Stitches earlier, I don't know if I'm allergic to the ivy or what, but I'm sneezing and I'm itching, and I think it's just all the fabric. Taking all the little bits of fabric off of that old wreath. It's not really an old wreath, but you know, it's a grapevine wreath that I customize with different looks when I feel like it. And I had so many threads and bits of wreath on my lap and on the sofa by the time I'd finished taking that apart. And of course, I've been raising dust like mad in here today with my sewing session this morning and again this evening. So, yeah. I always used to find when I was working at Fabricland that I'd be sniffing by the end of the day, and I think it's just the dust. It sets my nose off. And I've certainly been disturbing lots of that today. But hey, I got to use my sewing machine and my serger today, which is very exciting. So that's it. At the beginning of this vlog, I didn't think you were going to see me actually doing any active crafting, but I guess you did after all. I'm not sure how much of that you're going to see because I'm going to have to edit a lot of it out because it took quite a long time. So this will go up tomorrow, Sunday, and then I have a really busy week. So I'm not sure when the next vlog is going to be after this one because I have a lot of shifts this week, and on the one day I'm off, I have a social event to go to, at which I will definitely be getting footage because it will be crafting with friends again, just not at my place this time, which would be a nice change. So I'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.